Hello, economics students. Today we're going to talk about the characteristics of the free market system. In our previous class period, we talked a lot about command economies and a little bit about traditional economies. And it's important to know about how those types of economic systems work. But what I really want to focus on now, and really for most of the rest of the semester, is the free market system. And indeed, even though we're in a mixed economic system in the United States, our economic system is heavily weighted towards the free market system. So let's look at some of the characteristics of the free market system. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. By the way, you like this picture of the Rockford City Market? I think it illustrates the free market system as it exists in America, kind of in a neat way. So let's get going. First of all, in the free enterprise system, private property is an incredibly important characteristic. Private property are the resources or products that are owned by individuals or by businesses. Okay, resources that are owned by the government would be called public property, and we do have public property, of course, in the United States. But the vast majority of property in the United States and much of the world really today is private property. Ownership of private property does mean that you have certain responsibilities related to that property. You cannot, for example, just let your property in a residential neighborhood, deteriorate to such a degree that it starts hurting the property value of your neighbors. We have zoning laws that also relate to that as well. An interesting thing about private property is that private property rights extend to intellectual property through patents, copyrights, and trademarks. Okay, so intellectual property is basically referring to your ideas. And when you have an idea that can result in making money through your own creativity, then you have a right to the money that is generated as a result of your ideas, and that is intellectual property. And that prevents others from stealing your ideas. Intellectual property is protected through patents, meaning that you have the exclusive rights to an invention that you would make. You can patent your invention. Copyrights protects you, if you should create something like a piece of art or a novel writing, those are protected through copyright. So others cannot publish what you created for their own monetary gain. You get to get the monetary gain from what you have created through your creativity. Trademarks are things like the Nike swoosh, okay? Nike has a great deal of value associated with their trademark, and therefore you want to make sure that other companies aren't fraudulently adding the Nike swoosh, that logo, to products. You want to make sure that anything has that swoosh on it. Any profit goes to Nike. That's a trademark. So that's private property. We guarantee private property in the United States through the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. You don't need to write this down. I'm not going to test you on that. But the Fifth Amendment does say that you cannot be deprived of your life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So only, and if private property is taken from you for public use, you have to get just compensation for it. So private property is protected in the United States through the Constitution. We will not be a communist country in the United States where the government controls private property or government controls property because of the Constitution. Okay, another characteristic of free enterprise is the freedom of enterprise and choice. Freedom of enterprise means that you are free to use your resources to produce whatever you want. If I own a plot of land, that's, again, there's some government control. It has to be, for example, zoned for industrial use. I can put any kind of factory on that land that I want to. That's freedom of enterprise. I can use my resources however I want. Freedom of choice. Owners can use their property or dispose of it however they wish. Workers can seek any job that they want, and consumers may buy anything that they can afford. I'm not forced to use my money to buy a specific item. I can buy anything with that money as long as I can afford to buy it, as long as I have the money at my disposal. So that's freedom of choice. We can choose how we want to use our property, and we can choose anything we want to do in an economic role in our lives. Another element of free enterprise is this idea of self-interest. Your own self-interest requires you to deliver value to others. Okay? Businesses will seek the highest profit possible by providing the things that satisfy consumer wants. So a business isn't providing, for example, shoes. A shoe store doesn't provide shoes because they're just nice people that own that store. They're providing shoes because it is in their self-interest to do so. They want to provide shoes that people want. It's in their self-interest. They will make money by fulfilling those consumer wants. Along the same lines, workers want to maximize their income by maximizing their utility for employers. That word utility means the usefulness of something. So I, as a worker, can increase my utility, my usefulness for an employer by making sure that I have good education, good skills, and I need to work on improving my education and my skills throughout the life of my career, or else my education and skills will become outdated and someone younger possessing those skills better than me might take my job. So it's in my self-interest to continually be improving on my utility. Okay, the next up is competition. Okay, a very important element of free enterprise. Competition results from the freedom of choice. We are free to choose from multiple suppliers, multiple vendors. And again, this means that I have to make sure as a store owner that I'm providing, the best product at a good price because of competition. So there's two types of competition. There's market competition, which is the competition for buyers. You have this picture down here. Now, Taco Bell does not make the same thing as McDonald's, but I would say that both Taco Bell and McDonald's are competing for the same customer, the same buyer. And who is that buyer? It's someone who is looking for an inexpensive, quick meal. Okay, so it can be a taco, it can be a Big Mac. It really doesn't matter to most of the buyers. They're just looking for something quick and inexpensive. Taco Bell and McDonald's are competing with each other for that buyer. That's market competition. There's also resource competition, where producers are competing for the limited resources. Remember, our resources are scarce. That means that there's a scarcity of labor, there's a scarcity of land, and by land I mean all natural resources. There's a scarcity of capital. So we're competing for all of that. And in this picture, you see some competition for the resource of land. You have a new developer here. It looks like they're building a new residential area. They haven't put the houses up yet, but they got the infrastructure of streets being put in place. Well, guess what? This developer is competing with the farmers who have had the land up to this point. Now, they have to compete for the same land. The land cannot be used for both farming and residential development. That's resource competition. What are the effects of competition? Well, for sellers, the effects might not be all that great from their perspective. It does lower their profit. They have to keep prices low to make things affordable to fight the competition. It also forces sellers to be innovative and to constantly work on improving their efficiency. Now, I mentioned that from the seller's perspective, that's not necessarily a great thing. That's a lot of work. But from the perspective of society at large, it's a wonderful thing. We want to make sure that these companies are innovative. It makes them make better things for the people of the society. We want to make sure that companies are efficient, improving their efficiencies, because if you don't improve your efficiencies, you are not utilizing resources in the best way. We want to make sure that our resources, which are of course limited, are used in the most efficient manner possible. So that's one effect of competition. From the perspective of the buyer, competition results in lower prices, more choices, and usually better quality. I put a little asterisk there. Some of you may know that I came from the telecommunications industry, where I spent over 20 years before I became a teacher. When I was a child, this is what a telephone looked like. Okay, everyone had a phone that looked like that back in the 1960s and 50s. And this was an amazing device. I could pick up that handset. I would have what we call a dial tone, and I could put my finger in those little slots and dial a telephone number, and I could speak to someone all the way on the other side of the world. What an amazing adventure. Adventure. Well, it could be an adventure. It's also what an amazing invention to be able to speak to someone thousands of miles away and carry on a conversation. What's more, that device that you see there was virtually indestructible. I could drop it. It wouldn't break. I could actually, this is true, there were experiments run where an 18-wheeler truck drove over one of these phones and the phone did not break. It could still be used. What an incredible device that was. So why don't anyone have these anymore? We don't use those devices anymore. As wonderful as they were, now people use stuff that looks like this or something comparable to that. Now, is anyone going to trade their smartphone for one of these phones? Probably not. These are so much better. You know, so much innovation and creativity went into the smartphone. Now, the asterisks. This phone here that you see in that person's hand, no 18-wheeler is going to be able to drive over that and that phone still be usable. It's going to break, okay? But it does so much more, and that's the result of competition. Competition has made telephones totally different than what they were 30, 40, 50 years ago. Also, on that we talked about this, in a recent class period. The old cars in East Germany, communist East Germany, that's what they drove, the Trabant. At the same time, 1980, when people were buying these cars in East Germany, just across in West Germany, people were driving BMWs that looked like this, or Mercedes-Benz that looked like this. These are both 1980 models. Why did they make such better cars in Western Germany versus East Germany? Competition. That's the answer. Kind of like this cartoon. Making a profit was a lot easier before so many countries abandoned socialism and started competing. Yeah, competition's tough on the businesses, but it's great for consumers. Okay, the price system. The price system is a message system to facilitate the exchange of goods and services. Well, what does that mean? Well, prices have two functions. They measure consumer desire. A high price basically equals more consumer desire. That is, a product that has greater utility will typically command a higher price. Okay, that's one function of prices, measuring desire. Prices provide incentives, purchasing incentives. You lower the price, that gives a purchasing incentive. Production incentives, if I can get a higher price for something, that provides me a production incentive, okay? So those production and purchasing incentives kind of work against each other to provide some kind of equilibrium where you get the good price that it provides an incentive to purchase the product as well as the incentive to produce the product. Okay, specialization is another characteristic of free enterprise. Specialization is a process in which businesses and people focus on producing one or just a few parts of an entire product or product line. Okay, we specialize. So here on State Street in Rockford, Illinois, you have a store here that is specializing in chocolate. They could specialize in all kinds of candies or all kinds of food products, but they have chosen to specialize in chocolate. Here's another company, Ingersoll in Rockford, Illinois. They specialize in the production of a specific type of capital good, a machine tool company. They produce capital goods. They've chosen not to specialize in non-capital goods. Okay, you have specialization in various elements here in the production of clothing, specializing in the production of the threads, in the textiles here, in transporting the clothing, and in selling it at the final product in a store. All of this is different types of specialization. So what's the end result of all these characteristics is the voluntary exchange of resources and goods and services in a free market. Voluntary exchange. We're going to focus on this in one of our next classes, but voluntary exchange is the key to creation of wealth. And all of these characteristics of free enterprise that we have covered here lead to voluntary exchange of goods and services, which makes us all wealthier. And we're going to see how that makes us wealthier in a future lesson. With that, I'm going to stop this lesson Check Canvas as always to see if there's any assignment for you there, and have a wonderful day.